Previously on Bio Ball Z, our heroes clashed with the content of Biology 1 and discovered the different structures in the cell's nucleus. But just when they were getting the hang of how genes create characteristics, they were attacked by the cell cycle. But by sneaking into the realm of Biology 2, they found it easy to understand mitosis and even meiosis. And now, our heroes have entered the hemoglobic realm of heart and blood. Will they find this challenge heartbreaking? Will they end up shedding blood themselves? Find out in today's episode of Bio Ball Z. Here are the retrieval questions for this lesson. You know what to do. The longest stage of the cell cycle is interphase. Genes are sections of DNA that code for characteristics. The mass of a proton is 1. The mass of a neutron is also 1. The atomic number for carbon is 6, so it has 6 protons. And the mass number for carbon is 12. So 12 take away 6 gives us a number of neutrons, which is 6. First, let's look at what blood actually is. Blood is a connective tissue that transports nutrients and waste around the body. The components of blood are plasma, red blood cells, white blood cells and platelets. Here are the percentages of each of these components, but they're not in order. Spend some time trying to match up the components and their relative percentages. Plasma is 55% of blood, red blood cells account for 45% of blood, and then white blood cells and platelets make less than 1%. Looking at this, you'll realize that the percentage is actually higher than 100%, but that's simply because we've rounded some of these numbers up. Plasma is the liquid portion of blood, and it's what dissolves and carries the different substances and cells around your body. Some of the main functions are this. It carries carbon dioxide to the lungs. It carries urea from the liver to the kidneys. Urea is one of the main waste products in organisms. Finally, it transports digestion products such as glucose from the villi to individual cells so they can perform respiration. Next, we have red blood cells. You can abbreviate these to RBC. These are biconcave cells that use hemoglobin to carry oxygen around the body. Biconcave just means two curves, which is obvious from its structure. The biconcave shape provides a large surface area to absorb oxygen. They are unusual in the sense that they do not have a nucleus, and this is so that they have more room for hemoglobin. Okay. They also carry oxygen from the lungs to respiring cells all around your body. Next up, we have the white blood cells, which are used in your immune response. They engulf cells in a process called phagocytosis, literally cell eating.
Time for lunch, munch, munch.
They produce antibodies to kill pathogens. Pathogens are microbes that can cause a disease. Check out this playlist for more detail on that. They also produce antitoxins to neutralize some of the toxins that these pathogens can make. Finally, we have platelets, which are cell fragments that help to clot blood. They use enzymes to convert fibrinogen into fibrin, which is a fibrous protein. This traps red blood cells, forming a clot. When the clot dries, it forms a scab. Back in the day, people just thought blood was soaked all around your body, inside your body, just like you were like a container of blood. But then man like Harvey discovered that blood actually flows through blood vessels almost 500 years ago. He wrote his work in this book here, De Motu Cordis, which literally translates to the motion of the heart. You can actually find this book where all the cool kids hang out, aka the library.
And all you need is this uncle, you're actually wet.
Well, of course I'm wet. Humans are almost 60% water.
Ugh.
So, blood moves around in the circulatory system, which is just the system of blood vessels and your heart. And you have 3 blood vessels.
1, 2, 3.
Can you name the 3 different types of blood vessels that you have in your body? The 3 are arteries, veins, and capillaries. Arteries carry blood away from your heart. I've got these images here to help you with these challenge questions. Do your thing. The blood in the arteries is usually oxygenated. I say usually because we'll see some exceptions soon. The thick layer of muscle and elastic fiber helps the arteries withstand the high pressure of blood. The bottom 2 pictures were there to help you clock that a pulse is a shock wave that starts in your heart and runs along the walls of your arteries. Veins carry blood towards your heart. Based on these pictures and your memory from the previous challenge questions, have a go at these questions. The blood in your vein is usually deoxygenated. The pressure is lower in your veins, and we can tell this because the walls are relatively thin in your veins. This indicates that the pressure must not be that high. Looking at the bottom picture, we see that the valves prevent the backflow of blood. So valves prevent backflow of blood. The final blood vessel are capillaries, which are specialized to take blood to individual cells. Have a go at these challenge questions. The main chemical reaction you need to know for animals is respiration. Therefore, the 2 nutrients leaving the capillaries will be glucose and oxygen. Carbon dioxide and water, and also urea, are 3 waste products entering the capillaries from individual cells. And immune cells like white blood cells find it easier to move through thin layers of cells. And then the thin layer also makes it more efficient for things to diffuse in and out of them. These 3 blood vessels connect in a double circulatory system. This is 2 separate circulations happening within the same system. Whilst we're here, your blood is actually never blue. The reason we see a blue color when we look at some textbooks is because medical convention uses blue for deoxygenated blood. If your blood is actually blue, you must be a horseshoe crab.
Jesus Christ.
Speaking of convention, whenever you're looking at the circulatory system or the heart on a page, imagine that the body is laying down facing upwards. That means that their right side is on your left side and your left side is on their right side. This is because the earlier drawings were done by physicians looking at dead bodies. I've got these challenge questions for you to have a go at now. Do your thing. Oxygenated blood is represented as red. Pulmon is Latin for lungs. So whenever you hear the word pulmonary, you know that we're dealing with lungs, okay? If like fish, you have a single circulatory system, your 2 types of blood will mix, meaning that your heart has to pump faster to achieve the same level of oxygenation because the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood are mixing. Now we come to the heart.
I feel, my heart crack.
The vessel that we have here is the vena cava. The top comes from the head and the bottom is coming from the body. This one on top here is the aorta. And here we have the pulmonary artery and vein. And then we have the atria on the top and the ventricles at the bottom. These structures here are valves. We'll look at them in more detail later. To help us work out the whole cycle, let's invite our friend, our red blood cell here called heme.
Hello.
Deoxygenated blood from the vena cava starts by entering the right atrium. This is pumped then down to the right ventricle and then pumped into the pulmonary artery. This will make its way to the lungs where it collects oxygen from the air. I'll explain more detail about that in a second. This oxygenated blood then comes back to the heart via the pulmonary vein, entering the left atrium. This is when it's then pumped to the left ventricle at the bottom here, and then finally it's pumped to the aorta to nourish the rest of your body. With all of that done now, I'd like you to have a go at these challenge questions. The top chambers are the atria. The muscle is thicker on the left hand side. That is because that is the side that's going to pump the blood to the whole system, that left ventricle. Finally, I started the journey with heme at the right atrium, and so the first pump happens here. This is where the pacemaker cells are located. So the right atrium is where the pacemaker cells are located that initiate that heartbeat. We would now look at some of the diseases that can occur in your cardiovascular system. Coronary heart disease is the narrowing of the coronary arteries, which are the arteries that supply blood to your heart cells. Think carefully about what the heart actually does. Why would the narrowing of the coronary arteries be problematic? This is worth 4 marks, so we need 4 separate points. There is a lack of blood flow when the arteries are narrowed, so less blood is reaching the heart cells, which means less oxygen reaching them, which would then kill the heart cells because they cannot perform respiration. This is technically what happens in a heart attack. The cause of the narrowing is the buildup of fatty materials inside the coronary arteries. There are 2 ways in which coronary heart disease, or CHD, or cardiovascular disease, or CVD, can be treated. Stents can be used to keep the arteries open, and statins are drugs that reduce blood cholesterol, which then slows down the buildup of those fatty materials in the arteries. Another issue some people could have are leaky valves. This occurs when the heart valves do not close properly. Remember that in veins, the valves prevent the backflow of blood. The same is true for the heart, but we see that backflow of blood is occurring here. This means that each heartbeat is not as efficient as it should be. A common symptom is that patients easily become breathless and may even eventually die if it's not treated.
Look, I'm dead. No, don't. Leave me alone, I'm dead. No, you will not die.
We treat this by using either mechanical valves, which are made from either titanium or polymers, but the patient, if they're having a mechanical valve, has to use a medicine for the rest of their lives to prevent blood clots. Or it can be treated by using biological valves, which are made from animal tissue and require no medicine. Alright, I think we're ready for a 6 marker now.
Oh my god.
It honestly isn't that bad. Let's go through this. We first have a table that displays information on living human heart valves and cow tissue heart valves. Notice that both are biological valves, so we're not dealing with mechanical valves here, they're both biological valves. A patient needs a heart valve replacement. A doctor recommends the use of cow tissue heart valves. Give the advantages and disadvantages of using a cow tissue heart valve compared to using a living human heart valve. Use information from the table and your own knowledge in your answer. Advantages. We have an abundant supply of cows. Cows are everywhere. It's a quick operation, is a quicker operation than the living human heart valve. It's also less invasive. The living human heart valve has your chest all opened up.
Jesus Christ.
Finally, it's cheaper. So for us broke guys out there, we have an option. Disadvantages. Cows are sacred in some religions, so we could have some religious objections to using cows. The tissue is from a cow, which is different from a human, so the tissue could be rejected by the human's body. There could also be a transfer of a disease from a cow to the human. And finally, there is the risk of blood clots from stents. If the patient's heart fails, then they will need a heart replacement. But hearts aren't just lying around growing on trees waiting to be plucked, so we need donors for heart transplants. Whilst the patient is waiting, they need to get an artificial heart that keeps them alive whilst they wait for a donor's heart to become available. I think it's actually dope when people give up their organs for others when they're able to do so. If you're wondering why is this heart, mechanical heart, beating by itself, that's something separate, but for your own heart, the reason why it beats is shown in this image here. These are called pacemaker cells, and they keep your heart in check. Here are some challenge questions. You know what to do when you see these. We see that these pacemaker cells are located in the right atrium. Remember that the heart is viewed as if you're seeing someone looking up at you. Anything moving that fast in the body is likely to be an electrical impulse. If these cells that set pace for your heart are damaged, it would mean that your heart will either not beat or will have an irregular beat. The technical name for an irregular heartbeat is arrhythmia. When there is a problem with the heartbeat, then we need an artificial pacemaker to set pace. Now, the heart isn't just working by itself, it works closely with the lungs, so let's look at that next. The word lung is actually pretty interesting. Lung comes from the Germanic word that literally means the light organ. We'll see why in a second, why it's so light. Here we see that we start with a trachea, which splits into two bronchi. At the end of the air passage, we have millions of these small sacs called alveoli. Now I've got these challenge questions for you to have a go at. Remember that it's the capillaries that transfer blood to individual cells, so these are coated with capillaries. The gases being exchanged are oxygen and carbon dioxide. Finally, the shape of the alveoli helps it provide a high surface area for diffusion of these gases. And there we go! The lesson is done.
Fatality.
Look below to chop some of the revision material in the description, and I'll catch you guys in a bit.